local history, local culture, local events, your community. This is the Joe Kelly Show.
Hi there, everybody. Welcome to the show. The state senator is our guest, Joe Griffo. We're going to be talking about a variety of state issues, including some polls that just came out. But before we do that, we're going to say welcome. Good to see you again.
It's always good to see you, Joe.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
You bet. Before we get into the polls, I got to tell you something that happened the other day. I was at Saratoga, the racetrack, and who comes walking by but Lee Zeldin, the gubernatorial candidate for governor. And I yelled a greeting to him and asked him when he was going to come to Oneida County. I should have asked him when he was going to come up and do my show. Who knows? That might happen someday. But the thing that I wanted to talk to you about was I saw a poll where he is, it was Trafalgar. He has narrowed the gap tremendously.
Well, as we know, people begin to be more focused after Labor Day. We're now in the stretch run of this campaign, and I think this is such an important race for our state because so many people are dissatisfied and don't like the direction the state is moving in. So it was encouraging to see the numbers are closer because there have been a number of polls and showing a variety of different numbers where they feel that he's behind double digit, but to know that it's, which many people believe and feel, that there is a closeness to this race because this current governor is new, never been elected to this office, and if you talk to people about where and how things are being done and how they feel about that, more of them are not happy with the state of New York and the way it is right now.
You endorsed Zeldin, did you not?
Correct.
Yeah.
Congressman and I served together in Albany State Senate. We got to know each other well, and he's served in the House for a couple of terms now. So I think he's a capable individual, and he'll present a vision that I think we need to see in this state because people are clamoring for change. They don't like what's happening, so in order to effectuate that change, you have to have somebody new at the top. And I'm hopeful that these polls are indicating that this is going to be a race. There is an opportunity and a path for victory for Lee Zeldin, and it reflects the mood of the people.
Well, it's interesting you say that about the clamoring because there was another poll, speaking of polls, and I think it was Spectrum that did this poll that said a majority of people think New York State is going in the wrong direction.
Absolutely. Not only Spectrum, but you see this in Siena. When they ask right track, wrong track, the typical question they would ask in polling, are we moving in the right direction, wrong direction? There's an overwhelming majority that are dissatisfied and believe that the state is heading in the wrong direction. Well, if you feel that way, then the individual who's in charge is bringing you in that direction. So I'm hopeful that's also what we're seeing now where people are saying the only way to change that is to change who is running our state. And that's why there's a path for Lee Zeldin. And I think it is proven in these statistics that we're seeing right now, the competitiveness of this race. So it'll be an interesting 2 months. And again, though, the one thing that no one can deny is people are not happy. And you could see that in the numbers of people leaving the state of New York. I call it the exodus. Every census that we receive, not only in the 10-year periods where it's done, but in the biannual updates that are done, we continue to lose population. We lost a congressional seat again this year. So to me, that tells you everything, that people are not happy and they're leaving the state because of that dissatisfaction.
I was going to say there's ramifications when you lose population, and losing a congressional seat is one of the things.
Well, absolutely. I mean, you lose that voice in Congress, you lose the positioning on federal aid, because all of this is looked at in a variety of ways. So when you look at census data and how it impacts and affects communities across the state. But yeah, I think we got to recognize that people are not happy, and it's because of the policies that are being put in place and the people who are in charge of those policies. And I'm hopeful that that will be reflected again this fall when people head to the polls and know that elections have consequences, and then they can make a decision accordingly saying, we want a new direction, we need a new governor.
One of the differences between, and I didn't mean to make this all about the gubernatorial race, but one of the differences between Zeldin and Hochul is gun laws. Big difference.
Well, it's a very big difference, and you saw what happened over the last couple of months. We had an emergency session in July, on July 1st. There was no reason to have an emergency session except that it served her political interests at the time, the governor, and as a result of the proposals that she put forth, and that was passed by the legislative majorities, because here in New York now, and I believe this is unhealthy, there's no balance because we have one-party control over the legislature, the executive branch, and I think that causes many challenges for people, particularly upstate. But the law, we never saw a bill. We got to Albany and there was no bill for us to review. There was no opportunity for people to weigh in, the public. And something like this, if you're going to undertake major policy changes, she used emergency powers, which she has constitutionally, that can waive the waiting period, because as you remember in your days in the legislature, there's a 3-day waiting, aging process where people then have the opportunity to read the bill, to debate the bill, to get input about the bill, and none of that took place right now. So the gun laws that were effectuated are some of the most restrictive, and the problem is, and in my opinion, infringing on Second Amendment rights, and you'll see this now with the court action. In fact, the most recent, one of the federal judges indicated that he felt that there was not a constitutionality to some of the laws that have been passed, but he was reserving without prejudice judgment because the law had not been in effect yet. And I don't think, the question we need to ask ourselves is, as a result of these laws, will New Yorkers be safer? And I can tell you, we will not be safer, because these are burdens being put on law-abiding citizens. The criminals will continue to find ways and access to firearms and to commit crime. If we want to acknowledge some of the rise in crime, which is another reason people are unhappy in New York, acknowledge some of the policies that these legislative majorities and this governor has implemented, which have led to this. For instance, the bail changes. Yeah. And so now you're arrested and you're released. It's catch and release. And to me, these are the things that are causing some of the problems and the incidents that we see across the state.
I see some political office holders now starting to waver on their support for bail reform because of what's happened. Where do you see this going?
Well, look, there was a need for criminal justice reform. We can't sit there and say everything is perfect, and there's an opportunity then to review and examine as to what can and should be done to make the system better. But this is philosophic and political right now. They just don't believe that people should be incarcerated. And now, so you see people committing the same crime over and over again and being released. And the criminal understands this now and says, not worried about it, I can go do this because I'm going to be released. Yeah. There's no consequence. And I think that's so wrong. So yes, they're seeing this because they know the public is upset. But whether or not they're going to really do anything to change that, they've made some modest tweaks that amount to nothing, really, in order for them to say, hey, look, we hear you and we're trying to do something. They're not, and they don't want to. And the concern is that after this election, the governor will be in for 4 years and the legislative majorities will continue to have another 2-year cycle. So I think people need to be sensitive to that, and we need to understand that that's why when you have these campaigns, to engage and educate yourselves, because that kind of change will make a difference as to how we live our lives.
State Senator Joe Griffo is our guest. We're talking about a variety of state issues. We got much more to talk about. Short break, right back. And welcome back, everybody. State Senator Joe Griffo is our guest. We're talking about a variety of state issues. The senator represents a district. It's, I think, the second largest geographic district in New York State.
Second or third currently.
Yeah.
I mean, that's going to change in a couple of months, but right now it's most of Oneida, all of Lewis, and half of St. Lawrence County.
Goes right up to the border, doesn't it?
It goes right up to the Canadian border, so from the Mohawk River to the St. Lawrence River.
Mm-hmm.
But as a result of redistricting, which is done after each census, and this year we had a number of iterations of that because the people had spoken and we were trying to go to a nonpartisan, non-gerrymandered districts. I had been in 14 different counties, though, since February in 4 different iterations. In fact, I think we were 47, 49, 51, and now 53. If you were Peyton Manning, you could yell Omaha and just we throw the, hike the ball and throw.
Yeah.
So now the current 53rd, which is court ordered, will be all of Oneida County and all of Madison County, half of Shenango County, and a portion of Herkimer County.
Do you like that?
It's going to be more concise, but we have to get to know, a lot of new area now, like in Shenango County, and I've been around Herkimer, so I feel more familiar there, and we know a lot of the players in Herkimer County, so that'll be a good transition, and Madison similarly. So we'll work, we've already been out a little bit meeting many of the elected officials and trying to get to some of the community events, but we'll get to learn the new area and obviously do our best to continue to be as best a representative and advocate for the communities as possible.
Are you maintaining other offices outside? I mean, your main office is at the state office building in Utica.
That's interesting. So we're going to have to ascertain after the election if and how we approach this. The main office is in Utica. You have the Albany office. Currently, we've had a part-time person in the North Country, so I envision we'll do something similar now for the remainder of the district, but we'll have to make that assessment and determination, as I said, post-election.
Yeah, when do you go back to Albany? I was not going to say when you go back to work because this is your full-time job, but when do you go back to Albany?
And I appreciate that because
Yeah.
most people think that if you're not in Albany, then you're really off and you're on vacation.
Mm-hmm.
But as you know, having served in the legislature, that there's a lot of work that goes down in the communities and at home throughout the year. Well, it's constituent service. It's advocating for some of the community needs and have a number of meetings regarding a number of issues and challenges that may be facing many of our towns, villages, school districts, county government, and constituents. So the legislative session is scheduled from January to June. So that's when we're in there passing bills. And I also believe the less we do, sometimes the better it might be, because a lot of people always gauge how many bills you passed. I think maybe less is better because it's less onersome on the people in the communities that we represent. That's my perspective at least. But January to June we'll be there legislating. And it could go anywhere from 3 to 5 days a week during that time period.
Do you have a piece of legislation? I know you've got legislation that's going to come back up because it didn't pass. So that'll be brought back again, right?
Yeah, what we do now is when you have a change of term, you have to start all over again. So we will introduce some of our bills that we have again in session. They have to be introduced each year, but in the start of a new legislative term, they definitely have to be re-represented. They may be given different bill numbers. We'll look at who's co-sponsoring or how we present this in both houses because we have assembly sponsors for many of the bills too. So that'll all take place again post-November, and we'll take a look at our legislative agenda.
Do you have a piece of legislation in the back of your mind that you'd like to get out there this new session?
Well, we have a number of bills, right? We have bills that are local needed bills. In fact, we passed a number of local bills this year for the communities. In fact, one took so long for something that made so much sense here, and a piece of road that the town of Deerfield wanted to give to the state, which the state DOT were willing to accept near SUNY IT, SUNY Poly. And so it took us so many years to get it done in the Assembly. We would pass it in the Senate, but we were fortunate this year I think with Assemblyman Smullen and Assemblywoman Buttonshaw, they've all collaborated and got it passed and signed into law. So there are a lot of local bills. And then from a statewide...
Hang on to your thought for a second. Why did it take so long to get that
It's a good question. I asked the same question, particularly when the state agency, because the Assembly didn't want to pass it. For some reason, the staff and the Transportation Committee just resisted.
Because really, all that's going to do, it's going to give, it's going to take away some plowing and some maintenance and things like that from the town of Deerfield?
Correct, right. And there's state roads around it, and it's a state institution of higher education. So it all made sense, and the state DOT was not adverse. You know, so many times what will happen is state agency will say, well, hold on, maybe we don't want to do this, and then the governor will say, well, we maybe shouldn't sign this bill, or a respective committee in the House, Senate, or Assembly might say, we can't move this. There was just some issue in the Assembly Transportation Committee. We used to talk to Bill Magnarelli from Syracuse all the time, who chairs that committee, saying, what are you doing? Why can't you let this bill out? Got it done this year. So there's local bills. From a standpoint, I'm trying to think of, we also have a number of statewide bills that could effectuate statewide changes. But what I like to talk about more is the need for reform. We need term limits in New York. We need it, and the governor said she supported it. So we need to really do something about it. Let's actually put a bill before the legislature and see how people vote up or down. Because I have that bill. I believe in that bill. There will be some who say, well, you talk about it, but you're here. Well, I want to change the rules, but I'll play by the rules that exist until I can get the rules changed, because I don't want to disadvantage my community. And much of what we do there is based on this seniority and where you are in the system. So if I knew that if I could set the example by leaving like George Washington did, right, 2 terms and out, and everybody else did the same, I'd be happy to lead by example. But unfortunately, it's a different mindset in Albany. And I can't even get action on the bill. And this is bipartisan. I mean, even when the Republicans were in charge, it was difficult for me to get them to consider a bill like that, because you're talking about putting limits on themselves. We did get it done in the Senate relative to leadership. It's a rule of the Senate that I was successful in getting passed, that no leader or chair of a committee can serve in that capacity for more than 8 years.
Yeah, we can back up. Ask you a couple of questions about upstate New York City.
Sure.
State Senator Joe Griffo is our guest. Short break, right back. And welcome back, everybody. Thanks for sticking with us. State Senator Joseph Griffo is our guest. We're talking about a variety of state issues. You know, an issue, we'll get back to that other thing in a second, the upstate, downstate, but this has gotten a little controversial. Judge David Hurd had announced that he was going to, it's kind of like semi-retirement, isn't it?
Correct, senior status.
Yeah.
Federal judges are appointed for life. We've been fortunate to have this district court sit in Utica. I think Judge Hurd has been an extraordinary judge, has an excellent reputation. And when you do this, it opens the seat up. And I believe the 2 U.S. senators kind of go back and forth who has the opportunity to recommend to the president for nomination, and then it goes to confirmation of the Senate. And in this case, Senator Gillibrand was up, and she recommended somebody from the Capital District. And it was in the newspapers that the person she had nominated was going to hold court in Albany. Now, they already have 2 sitting federal judges in Albany. There's a couple in Syracuse, a couple of magistrates, I think, in Albany, too. So this is outrageous to steal a judgeship from this community to be put in the Capital District. Once she got called on it, she then said, well, the judge will commute to Utica, keep the court there, which I thought was silly. Because once that started, he could change his mind anytime he wanted. Then it became, well, the judge was going to relocate to Utica, which we'd love to have somebody come and relocate to Utica, but I doubted the sincerity of that too, because once the appointment is made, they could change their mind and do what they want. So Judge Hurd withdrew his request for senior status, and then Senator Zeldin got a number of national organizations to begin to defame the good judge because she wanted her way. In my opinion, this is a classic illustration of a U.S. Senator who's ignored this area, who's indifferent to this area, and she's underrepresented this community for so long. And I just think it's shameful that you would try to discredit a judge to try to get your way. There are a number of capable people in this community that could be considered from professional skill sets and politically, because it'll be a Democrat, obviously, because there's a Democrat president, and that's what they're going to do, which is fine. But just pick somebody from the Mohawk Valley that is capable of doing this. And look, we need to be inclusive, but these are federal judges, and there are a number of people being represented from all ethnic backgrounds, all races, all genders, religions, and that's the way it should be. But to cite that now and say that's the reason, but to really steal a judgeship from this area is really shameful and unfortunate.
So how do you think it's going to go down with Judge Hurd rescinding his?
Well, he's withdrawn, so technically there's not an opening here. So I think they're in now they don't know really what to do, right? Because no opening exists. But I'm sure they're trying to push him now, unfortunately. And as I said, I think it was shameful to try to discredit him.
You had a press conference earlier this week, and it had to do with energy. Talk about that.
Well, the concern I have, and we talked about this before, as a former chair of the Energy Committee, I believe we should be using a diversified energy portfolio, that we should not be relying on any one particular segment of energy. It's the old, don't put all your eggs in one basket. If you saw what happened in Texas last year with the grid, how it went down, if anything like that happens to us, that it could be devastating for a lot of different reasons. So we're moving solely into the renewables right now. And I have no problem with renewables, but I think we need to ensure that they're proven. And what we have now is a situation where we're putting a lot of taxpayer funding behind these renewables, so we don't know how they're going to be able to stand on their own. And we're making orders. Look at California just recently, where they told everybody that they were going to do away with their gas-powered cars and they're going to go to electric vehicles. And then they told everybody they couldn't charge their vehicles, that they had to go because the grid was so overloaded that we're asking everybody not to charge the cars. It's just mind-boggling if you think about this and the approach we're taking, because again, it becomes more political than it does from good public policy. So what we did in New York is created this board that's now making decisions on where these projects can be sited. And it's taken away any control from local government. If this was the case, if you remember, we had the New York Regional Interconnect that was going to devastate communities upstate. We fought it and were successful in stopping it. Now you wouldn't be able to do that because this siting board that's been created by the legislature and the governor, by individuals that are not elected officials, can overrule a local town, village, or county as to siting. And if they had reservations or concerns, it goes beyond not in my backyard. It goes to legitimate concerns that communities could raise that now really are going to not make a difference, in my opinion.
One of the things that people have noticed, of course, using the thruway is we have, I don't know how long has this been, a year or something, that we've had no toll takers. We've done it all electronically. But something I noticed the other day, I said, well, I'll meet you down in, we were going to go downstate, and we're going to go in one car. So I said, meet me at the parking area at exit 31 in Utica. And I got down there was no parking area. What happened to those?
Well, there is a park and ride, but it's a little out of the way, unfortunately. And that's how we talked to the Thruway Authority about how they have to educate people. I think they looked at this and the planning wasn't the best. They wanted to go to the cashless and to using new technology, electronic tolling. But there are a lot of problems with that too, and we have been engaged in that people are being overcharged, and we warned them of that, to be prepared and to make sure that you're not putting a burden on the motorist, on the user of the thruway. And so the park and rides exist. They're in kind of, we used one last week at the State Fair in exit 33 in Verona, but it's a little, you got to get around it, know how to maneuver it. And so hopefully they'll continue to look at this, reassess it, and determine how do they make it easy for motorists to meet up, to carpool, and also to be charged properly, so they're not being overcharged because things are being misread.
So your advice is check your bill?
definitely check your bill.
Yeah. I know that somebody sent you a letter and said they were overcharged. I forget by how much.
We have a number of cases that we have presented to the Thruway Authority because initially they responded and said, it's an isolated incident here or there. And look, I think Matt Driscoll does a great job. He's the executive director of the Thruway Authority, former mayor of Syracuse. Yeah. But on the other hand, I just said, this is real. And there's a preponderance of this happening. It's not just an isolated case. And it can be just based on the placement of the tag. Mm-hmm. So I think, again, this is government taking on accountability and responsibility, not the motorist. Yeah. It's our job to make sure that they got it right.
Always good seeing you.
It's always a pleasure to be here, Joe.
Come back before January when you get real busy, okay?
Well, love to do that and hopefully host you in Albany again.
Well, we'll look forward to that, too. State Senator Joe Griffo has been our guest. That's going to do it for us this week. We'll be back next week. We'll do it all again. Don't forget cnyhomepage.com. Lots of good stuff there. Until next time, take care of yourself, everybody.